But the things that really connect me are relationships with people. Had this
Yeah.
experience, Danny? I think I'll bet others have. You're in a conference or something where you don't know a lot of folk, and somehow God connects you with one or two, three perhaps people who you just know are going to be special in your life from that moment on.
Mm,
And
mm,
I've collected a lot of those relationships over the years. So
mm,
my middle circle just has been growing and growing and growing.
mm.
And
It's
it's a
fantastic.
wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to have that in your life.
Mm,
And
mm,
people will be anxious and say, "Well, again, how do I serve God best, or where do I go to find these kinds of friends?" I think if you make yourself open,
mm,
yeah. Here's my answer to your question: is relationships are where I take strength, draw strength.
mm,
Make yourself open to really get to know people. If
mm,
you can be the one who says, I see you, I really see you,
mhm,
that can open their world up. They'll start to flourish
mm,
because you've seen them.
mhm,
Um, Andy Crouch has a two by two diagram that talks about how you establish flourishing. The punchline is, and we use this in a recent board retreat for the commission boards. The
mm,
punchline is when you have both maximum power and maximum vulnerability in a relationship, then the people in that relationship flourish.
mm, mm,
The apex of human flourishing is Jesus on the cross.
mm, mhm,
He had power, but chose to set it aside, make
mm,
himself completely vulnerable even to death,
mm,
so that we could flourish.
mm.
And
It
if you can
seems
do
as
that,
you share, sorry, Stephen, it seems as you share that empathy is such a big part of you, like to be able to connect with people deeply, quickly, and to be able to
yes,
say to someone, I see you, like people can just use those words, but it doesn't come off with the depth that you might. Um, and it might be because you notice an insight. You say something about how you see them. Is that a gift for you? Something
it,
empathy?
okay. So this goes right back, beautifully crafted, Danny. You've taken me right back to that moment
Mm,
in the church where I stepped forward to take communion.
mm,
I was afraid of what people would see in me. I was afraid to show myself.
mhm,
But after that happened, and I read Romans, and you suddenly realize that no one can when you have God on your side, like who
mm,
on earth is going to be able to do anything to you? And
mm,
now I can make myself vulnerable. I
mm,
don't have to hide or be afraid. I can
mm,
listen to people who are different to me, and I can apologize when I've hurt them, and
mhm,
that'll deepen my relationship because what they think of me doesn't matter. I know I'm
mm,
good with God.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Do you lead in vulnerability then? When you talk about that, because often I find in a conversation, it's a bit like how
Mm.
open are we going to go? If we're layers of onions, how many layers do we want to peel back? How much time do we have? What's the context for this meeting? And in how many layers do we reveal of ourselves?
It's a
And
great
is
way
that
of putting
something
it,
that
Danny.
yeah, is that something that you do really well? Because you might say something very vulnerable early, and they think, "Wow, we're going there, are we? Okay, let's be real."
Well, look, there are friends of mine on this call. They can attest to whether I lead with vulnerability, but I try to.
Yeah,
The times when I don't, it doesn't go so well.
mm, yeah,
Mm.
it's awesome. And can I ask you this as well? I'm in the game of property, and often I can feel that I'm just going about doing my work. Doing my work. I'm in the middle of whatever it is, and it's just project, project, project. And of
Mm.
course, there's parts of me that go, "Gee, that day just flew by." Um, where was God in that? It wasn't really. I was just in the grind. You know.
Oh, of
Can you talk a
course.
bit about? Can you talk a bit about that for yourself? Like we talk about that third circle, the expression of it, your broadcasting, the intentionality that you have, even that program that you. I remember watching that program, the one that you mentioned just before. What was it? The one with the um the stories. What was that one that you were saying with that about faith and hope?
Yes, that was called Open House. It was a
Open
radio
house.
program.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, look, do you know? So I've worked for different organisations.
Yeah.
I left I left commercial broadcasting and went into the Parliament of New South Wales, the famous bear pit, a
Mm,
hard place to serve. But
mm,
how can you serve? I just said to God, well, here I am sitting on the green benches. I'm the newest backbencher in the Parliament. I came in on a by-election.
mm,
I'll just try to be the best backbencher I can be. Show me how
mm,
to do that. He later
mm,
then he quickly showed me that it was again about relationships and people in
mm,
the Parliament, because I was able to listen confidentially and empathetically.
mm,
They would share the deepest things with me. It was extraordinary. So the ministry was up close and personal
mm,
sometimes. Other
mm,
times it was about trying to get good policy settings in place
mm,
so that communities could flourish. Other
mm,
times, as a local member, most people don't realize you actually are part social worker, part paralegal, part whatever, right? People come to you with their deepest troubles, and sometimes you can assist them, and sometimes you can't.
mm,
Um, so I served there, and then I worked. That was a non-Christian environment. Then I set up Christian Schools Australia with colleagues. We formed a new association for Christian schooling, and I represented Christian schools for 15 years before I retired to invest my these years of my life in helping to build Christian broadcasting. And the point of why I'm telling you this is this:
mm.
sometimes when you're in a non-Christian environment, it's actually easier to not get into the daily grind. I found inside Christian
Oh,
organizations, you can get into the daily grind
that's
and
interesting
forget why you're
insight.
doing it. Yeah,
Ah, why would that be?
because you get comfortable and you're not. The world isn't constantly in your face challenging you,
Mm,
forcing you back to your Bible every minute of the day. Well, we should be back in our Bible every minute of the day, with every decision we're making. But when we're in a Christian
mm,
organization and you can become culturally comfortable, you forget
mm,
that you've got to have a hard edge to what you do, because our job is to impact the world until Christ returns.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Stephen, do you have any comments on your relationship with your church? If you would go to a church, and how I'm kind of going down that road of the sacred secular divide. Church for some of us is to serve God
Yeah.
is to serve at church.
Yeah.
And what I do in my work is I work to earn money to pay for the bills and to look after my family. To those two, that extreme of dividing it in our minds. To I'm serving God when I'm in the church, and then I'm working to get to be practical.
I don't think there is such a thing as a secular sacred divide.
Mm,
I know a lot of people feel that, but it's not like Sunday school and then Monday I'm back to the uh, I can't look at what I'm doing without thinking of how I might be able to achieve godly purposes in it. Now, and there are many godly purposes, like evangelism is one. Yes, sure, tick. Sorry, big tick.
hmm.
Bringing, making Christ known and bringing people to Him, huge tick.
Yep.
But we're also to be a blessing to the city.
Mm,
And in Christian media at the moment, we're thinking about truth, beauty, and goodness. How can we represent truth to people? And that doesn't just mean, look, this is the Bible and these bits are the only thing. It's
yeah.
about truth as a relationship, right? Truth is, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, said Jesus. So truth actually
Mm,
comes to us from God Himself in the
mm,
form of a human being, fully man, fully God, who makes Himself
mm,
fully vulnerable and then dies for us. That's a
mm,
relational truth.
mhm,
Truth is not just epistemology, truth is relationship for the Christian.
mm,
So, how can I
mm,
relate to people in a way that represents that truth and that kind of vulnerability? How can I help point to beauty, the beauty of the world that God made, because He made it to be wonderful? So, I take pictures of the flowers in my garden and I post them on
mm,
Facebook. What am I doing?
mm,
I am showing people creation. Some of them get it,
mm,
some of them don't.
mm.
Um, and when
Love it.
they finally do get it, then the world becomes a better place for them. Our newsroom
Mm, mm,
tells us more about who our neighbor is. Our view of
mm,
the world is bigger than the view of the world in a commercial newsroom, perhaps, because we
mm,
haven't left the God bits out. We choose
mm,
stories for our newsroom because they matter to our neighbors, not just the fire that happened next door, the guy who got shot, in a uh, crime gang or whatever.
mm,
That's tabloids run with that stuff because it makes you feel nervous about living in the city. Actually, murder
mm,
rates are going down. I just saw the figures yesterday. I mean, they're going down fairly consistently for 10 years.
mm,
Um, And so that's about crime. It's not about me, but I still get afraid. So that sells newspapers. No, it's actually saying my neighbour is the person who. Oh, my favourite story was we found that there'd been a ferry had sunk in Kiribati, and Kiribati, and they say Kiribati. That's how they pronounce it. So I'll try to use their pronunciation. Kiribati is a series of islands, and it's like as big as the United States or something, or but it's just hundreds of islands separated like this, and they go everywhere by ferry. And a ferry was going to the main island, and it sank, and only a few people survived. And I saw this much in the Australian newspaper on it one day. This much. At the same time, there'd been a train crash in Chicago, I think it was. No, it was on the way to Washington, and we had nightly coverage on the TV news because there were pictures. And we get that, because it's got pictures, we can use it. There were no pictures of the ferry that sank in Kiribati, but my wonderful producer, Annie Ronaldo, found, living not far from our radio station, as a matter of fact, the brother of one of the survivors, and he'd been talking to his brother that day, and we got an interview with him and put it to air. And he told the story of how all the young men clung onto the side of the life raft because there wasn't room for everybody. But in the middle of the night, they got so cold, they just slipped
Wow.
off.
Wow.
Powerful story. We told that story because those people are my neighbors, my brothers and sisters. So too are the ones in Washington. But if we don't hear about Kiribati at the same time as we hear about Washington, then how good are we as Christians? So truth,
Thank
beauty,
you.
goodness is a
Mm,
framework that you might want to use.
mm. That's beautiful, mate. Thank you, Stephen, so much for your time. It's I'm getting the tap to wrap us up, but just I know it hasn't been long enough, but the little bit of the story and the sharing that you've given us, and I really sense from you this deep empathy. I'll say that again, and leading to open people up to get to who we are as humans. It's very much like the gospel where it cuts through everything and gets right in, and that's where Jesus is, right? And you're almost an instrument for that. Let's go. Let's get real. Let's be real with each other. Let's. Even Deb was referring to that earlier on. So I might bring Deb back up. I want to say thank you to you. Thank you very, very much for your time, and bring Adrian and Deb back up, and let's go to the next part.
Danny, did you want to ask anything in terms of next steps or?
Um, no, I just think that, just as Stephen shared, and I mean, it's a great story. I think, as Adrian was saying before, I think our heart is to champion us as individuals. We may not all have as a distinguished career as Stephen, but every story, every person's story is just so valuable, and I think that's certainly the heart of Adrian, Deb, and myself. We just love hearing people's stories, and that together, as we start to share more, we're learning something from each other. And what we build into is another part of this. It's just trying to find a place for us to connect and encourage each other. I love what Adrian shared and said, to be inspired by each other. I think that was a great word, Aids. Like, certainly sure that we're all inspired by the things that Stephen shared. So, but look, we're going to break up now into speed meets. And I mean, guys, take it anywhere you want. It could be just referencing some of the things that Stephen shared, about relationships, vulnerability, about the sacred secular divide. It could be about those three circles that, the picture of the individual, the circle about people holding hands but facing outwards, and those that are then exploring how it is that they go into the world doing what they do. And maybe you want to share part of your story with each other as well. But we're going to break into three lots of 5 minutes, and you can hit extend if you wish. Otherwise, we'll just keep mixing and mingling until we finish that, and then we'll head to the tables for any general catch up after that.
And continue to pick Stephen's brain. Brett, I see a question in there as well. I'm trying to get my head around your question in the first place. There's something to do about like doing anything for God. Is that a ministry? Like, yeah. So I'd love you to sort of grab a table and I want to ask about that as well after the sessions. But please also just bear with me in this because I got to end this session and I got to start the speed meets. So give us like 30 seconds grace. All right. Thanks, guys, and see you soon.